A chance to earn a paycheck, the pilot program that allows some residents of the city's homeless tent to hitch a ride to work.
Number one prescribed drug associated with deaths is oxycodone, then hydrocodone, then number 3, benzodiazepine.
These drugs are used to treat anxiety and panic attacks, and they're behind a deadly trend that's been flying under the radar.
I want to defeat Trumpism, but I also want to defeat defeatist Democrats.
Making their case to be the next governor of California. Democratic hopefuls taking a stand in San Diego. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Ebony Monet. The Alpha Project is launching a pilot program to pay homeless people to clean up neighborhoods around San Diego. KPBS reporter Susan Murphy has more from downtown.
The program is called Wheels for Change. This van will pick up about 8 people from the Alpha Project tent and transport them to a place in the city where they'll spend the day cleaning trash and graffiti, and they'll make $10 an hour.
I have no income coming in whatsoever, so this will give me some stuff to get some essentials I need, haircuts, shaves, because I'm trying to find a job.
Navy veteran Corey Gwynn lost his job a couple years ago and became homeless soon after. He says getting a chance to earn a paycheck is a dream come true.
I need to replenish my savings that I've gone through.
Many of the 323 other people living in the city's large homeless tent are also eager to sign up so they can buy things like bus and trolley passes or start a savings plan. Alpha Project CEO Bob McElroy is hopeful there will also be an outreach component.
Where our folks that are working here are going to be talking to folks that are on the street and maybe provide some encouragement for those folks to come in and start the process of recovery.
McElroy says his staff will closely monitor to make sure money is not spent on drugs or alcohol.
If you went out and worked on a crew for 4 or 5 hours and you come back inebriated, we know you did something bad with that money. So it's far more comprehensive.
A private donor purchased the van and is providing the initial costs. Starting out, work shifts will be scheduled for 5 hours a day, 3 days a week. Susan Murphy, KPBS News.
Florida's governor called for new measures today to prevent mass shootings at schools. Rick Scott's plan would ban the sale of firearms to anyone under 21.
I want to make it virtually impossible for anyone who has mental issues to use a gun. I want to make it virtually impossible for anyone who is a danger to themselves or others to use a gun.
It also calls for a trained law enforcement officer in every school in Florida by next fall. The sale of bump stocks would be completely banned under his proposal. Today's announcement came as teachers returned for the first time to Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School since the shooting that killed 17 people. San Diego County students are expected to participate in a nationwide school walkout to protest school shootings on March 14th. KPBS education reporter Megan Burke says unlike other regions, students here will not likely face suspension if they leave class.
Whether to discipline students who participate in the walkout is up to individual school sites, but the San Diego County Office of Education is urging teachers to instead focus on helping students digest and discuss the news following the deadly school shooting in Florida.
Student demonstrations aren't a new phenomena, and in the past, punitive responses and threats of punitive response really haven't been very successful. I think we stand a much better chance of success if we engage in dialogue.
Schools are also developing plans to keep students safe should they actually walk out of classes. School police officers do carry guns. It's illegal in California for teachers and administrators to carry guns at school. Megan Burks, KPBS News.
Delegates at the California Democratic Party convention in San Diego this weekend will decide whether to endorse candidates. 5 Democrats and 5 Republicans are running to replace Darrell Issa in the 49th Congressional District. The chair of the San Diego Democratic Party says the 49th is a horse race, and a party endorsement could help Democrats win one of the top 2 spots in the June primary election. Several Democratic candidates want to be the next governor, and in San Diego, people had a chance to hear what they had to say. KPBS reporter Jade Hindman was there and joins us with a glimpse.
Well, from taxes to gun violence, the topics up for debate last night were issues we're all talking about, and each candidate seemed to echo one another. Well, 2 of those candidates stopped to talk to our cameras and share their ideas about what they can bring to California. Each candidate says they want a better future for California, and each candidate has a different idea on how to achieve that. For former Los Angeles Mayor Antonio Villaraigosa, the economy leads the way.
I think they're looking for a governor that's going to focus on the economy, that's going to make sure that if you're working hard and playing up by the rules, you ought to have a better life.
For former Superintendent of Public Instruction Delane Easton, ending the school-to-prison pipeline is a top issue.
It's really time that we change the conversation and stop having Cadillac prisons and jalopy schools.
So where will each candidate focus their attention as governor?
We ought to be able to address a housing crisis that's made it almost impossible for young people to buy a home, for most of us to rent or buy a home. It seems to me that people here in San Diego, a place I know very well, are looking for that kind of candidate.
We've actually raised taxes a lot, but there's still a lot of things we can and should be doing for our schools and our children if we raise corporate taxes around property.
Between fixing the housing crisis and raising corporate taxes, both candidates say integrity and diversity will have to be embraced by the next governor of California.
There's probably nothing more important than integrity and honesty, character in our leaders. You know, too many people are turned off to politics and politicians, and one of the reasons why is that not enough of them understand that public service is an honor.
I do think it's really time that we elect more women to office. And I'm not saying I should be elected because I'm a woman. I'm saying I am the most qualified candidate. And for some people, I'm invisible because I'm a female.
And Lieutenant Governor Gavin Newsom and State Treasurer John Chung were also at the debate. All 4 candidates are scheduled to attend the state's Democratic Party convention underway at the Convention Center. Jade Hindman, KPBS News.
Chain migration or family reunification, a closer look at a program President Trump vows to end. An unpermitted North County gun range draws the ire of neighbors, and a cross-border animal smuggling operation exposed. Join us for the KPBS Roundtable tonight at 8:30.
There's a new development in our reporting on finding refugee homes in San Diego. KPBS has previously reported that the International Rescue Committee had struggled to find affordable homes for some large refugee families and placed them in apartments deemed too small in violation of occupancy guidelines. Now, public documents reveal the relief agency was warned about the practice earlier, yet it continued. I discussed the details with KPBS reporter Taryn Minto. So Taryn, can you give us a brief overview of your series of reports on the IRC's resettlement program?
So we found back in late 2016 that when there was a large number of refugees coming into San Diego, there were a few instances where resettlement workers were having trouble finding affordable homes that could fit these larger families. And so what ended up happening was a few of them left off some names on the leases in order to get large families of about 7 or 8 into homes that fit occupancy guidelines would say up to 5 or 6 people.
And what's the very latest, since your series of reports came out, what's the very latest regarding the federal monitors?
So we found that actually we brought our original findings to the IRC's attention, and they said that, you know, we did not know about this. They looked into it, and they found it actually happened more times than what we were reporting, and they made all these changes. But now we find out that even before we started looking into when these families were resettled, they were aware of this back in 2016 and in June. They were made aware of this when federal monitors came in for a very routine review and said, hey, we found a few instances where you're not adhering to occupancy limits. Please address that.
And so how did the IRC say it would address those concerns?
So back in June 2016, they said, you know what, we're going to look into more areas to find affordable housing, areas around the county that we weren't looking into before. They counseled refugees to not accept poor housing conditions, and they also said that they were retraining staff on their procedures. But we know from our previous reporting that that wasn't enough. The practice continued happening.
And speak to that. Can you tell us about when the concerns were addressed by the federal monitors and when you did your report and the timeline between the two and what that tells you?
Right. So the federal monitors came in there around June 2016. There was a surge of refugees coming in later that year, around August, September, October, November 2016. And then we were made aware that families who had been resettled during that time, and they were resettled in these smaller apartments, were actually being kicked out. One of them was actually being asked to leave their apartment because of overcrowding. And we were made aware of that about a couple of months after they were resettled. But just recently is when we found out that the federal monitors were there and gave them the heads up to, don't continue doing this practice. You're supposed to make sure that refugees have safe and stable and housing that can fit them and be of a sufficient size.
So getting to the heart of this issue, oftentimes these are families who are leaving a place where their lives are being threatened. Is this possibly a case of the IRC working very hard to help as many families as possible with such limited resources here in San Diego, where we know it's very expensive to live?
Right. Well, you don't get refugees only get a little bit amount of money per person. It's dictated by the federal government how much resettlement agencies get to spend on refugees to get them homes. So we spoke to a researcher who said, if this is the only option that resettlement workers thought they had, to put large families in smaller apartments and basically lie on these lease documents, then what are we giving them to work with? So it does point to this issue of, are the resources going far enough in an expensive market like San Diego? Yeah.
So how about the monetary incentives? Would the IRC have any sort of monetary incentive to continue to place families in homes deemed too small, even after this issue was raised by the federal monitors?
I think that's kind of unclear because the resettlement affiliates, the IRC San Diego is an affiliate of the national IRC. And the national IRC decides, okay, we have this many refugees this week, we're going to give X to San Diego. And so it's not about getting more money. While they do get money to support their operations for every refugee they take in, it's just if the resources aren't going far enough to begin with, even taking on more is probably taking on more work than it is more money.
Thank you so much, Taryn.
Thank you.
State lawmakers say they are working to protect tenants facing eviction. A push to expand rent control statewide failed last month. Still, officials say we need to act now.
We have a housing crisis, we have a homelessness crisis, and there has been a crisis facing tenants who are either facing evictions or on the verge of facing evictions.
Tenant protection bills would give people more time to respond to eviction notice. Another bill requires the landlord to give a valid reason for kicking them out. Chasing rainbows over San Diego. This is a shot from Golden Hill. We are expecting mild winter weather for the weekend, but the rain returns next week. Justin Povic has more in tonight's forecast.
Well, the winds are diminishing. We're going to be talking about some sunshine returning here for the weekend, along with some milder temperatures, actually going above normal here as we go through time. So precipitation's on the move out. Again, La Jolla earlier on had some showers as well as Poway, but notice now we're drying things out the same toward Oceanside, and again, the winds tending to calm down as well. And some snow off to the north over the mountainous terrain. We're going to have another chance for that here as we go further on down the line. But check conditions out further north toward the Sierra Nevada on the quiet side now, but heading out to the Wasatch and points east. Again, if you're traveling along Interstate 10 or Interstate 40 or even I-20, you could bump into a couple of problems. Overnight low temperature down to 44, and it's under a clear sky. Again, in the metro, not looking too active. And again, area-wide, look at the numbers here as we slip down for the overnight, falling down to 42 toward Chula Vista. Oceanside dropping down to 28. So again, there's your difference again from north to south. Check out these conditions here to kick off the weekend. Notice how the jet stream's a little bit wavy here. So one system kicks out, another system is going to be poised to dive in here over time. But at the same time, for a little bit, we'll see the onshore flow relaxing, and we'll get a bit of an offshore flow component. That means we're talking about lots of sunshine as we go throughout the day. Again, San Diego typically right around that 60-degree mark or so. So we're a couple degrees above that here for, again, tomorrow. And again, notice Alpine topping off into the upper 50s. Early week forecast, look at that big dip in the jet stream, and that means we're talking about some cooler temperatures and also some rainy conditions here toward the coast. Notice we top off at 68, though, for Sunday, so not looking too bad out there. We're going to be looking at the numbers falling back close to 60, though, as we go through time, along with some afternoon rain. And then we talk about inland locations up to 70 for Sunday, above normal. And again, I was talking about those normals, more like the mid-60s here into San Diego, so we're close to it here Saturday. We pop above that as we venture down the line. Mountainous terrain, some snow, again, as we venture into Tuesday. In desert locations, looking at some wet weather. For KPBS News, I'm meteorologist Justin Pomick. Back to you, Ebony.
America is in the grips of an epidemic of prescription drug overdose deaths, and opioids aren't the only medications killing people. Deaths linked to anxiety drugs like Valium and Xanax have skyrocketed in recent years. KPBS reporter Kenny Goldberg takes a look at a deadly trend that's been flying under the radar.
Valium and Xanax are in the class of drugs known as benzodiazepines. These medications help control anxiety, panic attacks, and insomnia. But they're habit-forming and have some dangerous side effects. Dr. Renette Lev directs the emergency department at San Diego's Scripps Mercy Hospital. She often sees the downsides of benzodiazepines.
That comes from people who come into our trauma center with car accidents because they're on benzodiazepines. People who come in because they're falling down, because that affects their balance and coordination on benzodiazepines. We've seen terrible withdrawals when they are used to having it, with seizures that end up in the ICU.
Lev says when it comes to drug-related deaths in San Diego County, benzodiazepines are right behind opioids.
Number one prescribed drug associated with deaths is oxycodone, then hydrocodone, then number three, benzodiazepine.
Nationwide, between 2002 and 2015, the number of deaths involving benzodiazepines more than quadrupled. Nathan Painter is an associate professor of pharmacy at UC San Diego. He says these drugs can be risky, and when taken in combination with opioid painkillers, deadly.
So the benzodiazepines themselves can cause respiratory depression or your breathing to slow down, and so can opioids. Opioids to a much more extent. So when you combine them, especially in the case of not using them on a regular basis or being new to the benzo or the opioid, and if you give too much or you combine it with other things like alcohol or other medications, then it can cause that breathing to slow down or even stop.
The San Diego County Medical Examiner found in 2016, 83% of the people who suffered a benzodiazepine-related death also had an opioid in their system. Painter says even when taken as directed, benzodiazepines and opioids can be a lethal mix.
Because both of them independently can cause problems, and a lot of times the physicians that are prescribing them aren't necessarily aware of all the drugs that are already on board, and may not be as conservative or as slow in starting the medicines as without that knowledge.
The Veterans Association healthcare system is trying to address these problems. Internal medicine specialist James Mickelson is chair of the San Diego VA's Pain Council. He says many veterans have conditions that would typically call for both a benzodiazepine and an opioid.
Anxiety related to their combat time, problems with sleep, post-traumatic stress disorder, and traditionally these conditions benzodiazepines have been used to treat. Additionally, many of our veterans came back with physical wounds as well.
But Dr. Mickelson says the VA is aware of the dangers and is making a concerted effort to scale back the co-prescribing of opioids and benzodiazepines. For example, if a patient is already taking an opioid and their doctor wants to add a benzodiazepine to the mix, a warning pops up on the computer doctors use to write prescriptions. Mickelson says over the past 2 years, the VA has made a 40% reduction in the number of co-prescriptions. He says the VA is also targeting benzodiazepines on their own.
10 years ago, the thought was benzodiazepines could help quite a bit with symptoms. And they do in the short run. People feel better when they take it, get a temporary relief. But in the long run, the benzodiazepines turn out to not help the condition very much and potentially can even be harmful. But now we have quite a few patients on benzodiazepines, and we have to start reeling those prescriptions back.
But the VA is facing a big challenge. 70% of their patients also get care from outside doctors. Scripps Mercy's Ranit Lev says the way to reduce benzodiazepine-related problems is to set up a barrier to prescribing them.
And by that I mean health plans and government paying for these medications. If they put stricter controls, then we would have less access.
But that wouldn't be easy. Benzodiazepines are among the most widely prescribed drugs in the U.S. And according to the San Diego County Prescription Drug Abuse Task Force, there's no shortage of them in our region. The task force says in 2016, local pharmacists sold more than 37 million benzodiazepines. Kenny Goldberg, KPBS News.
Enjoying art like an adult. A new measure in Sacramento would allow art galleries to serve beer or wine without a liquor license. Lawmakers say the measure would legalize an already common practice in the state.
Make it so they wouldn't have to go through the full bureaucracy of an ABC license and all of that to be able to have these art walk drinks. And so that's why we introduced the legislation, is to make sure that everyone can comply with the law in a similar way where there's been a carve out for salons and also barbershops.
The bill would keep galleries from paying hefty fines if they're caught serving alcohol without a license. This weekend brings celebrations of Black history and Mexican art. Plus, a former San Diego musician returns. Here with more is KPBS Arts Calendar Editor Nina Guerin.
San Diego celebrates Black history and culture with the 26th annual Kumbah Fest. The weekend celebration begins with a Black parade of history and continues with concerts, plays, film screenings, and educational summits. Kumbah Fest started as a gang diversion program in the 1990s and has grown into the city's longest-running festival of Black heritage and culture. In South Park, Mexican art and culture will be celebrated at the Barrios Hermanos Art Show. Barrios Hermanos is a collective that connects neighborhoods in Tijuana and San Diego. This art show brings together two artists that are popular on both sides of the border, Rodrigo Rod Villa and Jorge de Yaeche. Both artists create colorful, evocative pieces, and both will be at tonight's opening party. Finally, former San Diego musician Anya Marina comes back to town for a concert at Java Joe's.
I'm in too deep, now I know what they mean when they say it's serious.
Anya got her start playing at local coffee houses and clubs, and now her songs are heard on popular TV shows like Grey's Anatomy and How I Met Your Mother. She's based out of New York now and continues to write quirky songs about love and loss. Make sure to catch her at this intimate show. For KPBS Arts, I'm Nina Guerin.
Ash vs. Evil Dead returns for its third season on Starz this Sunday. And KPBS cinema junkie Beth Accomando can barely contain her excitement.
In 1981, actor Bruce Campbell and director Sam Raimi created the character of Ash Williams and made the indie horror film The Evil Dead.
It is entitled Naturan de Manto, roughly translated, Book of the Dead. The book is bound in human flesh and inked in human blood.
But when they created Ash, they didn't realize how much of a survivor he would prove to be, as he fought evil and deadites through 3 feature films over a decade. As Raimi and Campbell worked their way through the films, they honed to perfection their particular brand of splatstick, splatter gore, and slapstick comedy. And it's that tone and style that they brought to the Starz original series, Ash vs. Evil Dead, in 2015, resurrecting Campbell's character and the demons that have been pursuing him for 3 decades.
Looking sweet.
The series, which will have its Season 3 debut on Sunday, is wicked fun because it returns to the storyline with an outrageous sense of fun and originality, stemming in part from Campbell's willingness to poke fun at himself as the most unlikeliest of heroes. Raimi and Campbell tackled the series with a savvy understanding of their creative property and knowing exactly what their fans wanted. The result is one of the most gleefully entertaining shows on the small screen. It also helped that Starz was willing to give them free rein to take the show to splatter-gore extremes that were often hilarious. On Sunday, February 25th, Season 3 of Ash vs. Evil Dead premieres, and Ash discovers that he has a daughter and evil is coming to get her.
That's my daughter, Sandy. Mandy.
Brandy.
We're still getting to know each other.
I'm planning to celebrate Ash's return by making a pizza-nomicon, but you have to eat it before it eats your soul.
Come get some.
Beth Accomando, KPBS News.
You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Finally, we leave you with the sounds of La Tour at Capitol Public Radio. Thank you for joining us. Have a great night.